All right, hello, and welcome to Chit Chat with Chichopoulos, hosted by your one and only Cassandra Chichopoulos. And my special guest today is Mr. Jerry Koutavas, who has joined us today to speak about his experiences serving as a teacher representative on a local school council for Chicago Public Schools. So welcome, Jerry. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Can you just share a little bit about how you heard about local school councils and how you got involved with them a little bit?
I started getting involved on the PPLC.
For those of you listening, that's the Professional Personnel Leadership Committee that reports to local school councils. Is that correct?
Right. So I thought that was kind of a cool thing to do because I felt like having more of a say in like kind of what's happening at the school. And it also sort of gave me some insight into kind of like the working background of the school, like the things that you don't really hear about what's going on, especially at an admin level. It was something that I thought I could do, I wanted to do, and to serve the school in a greater capacity than just as an educator. I also served as a student voice committee as staff advisor, and so I thought bringing that connection between like the students and to the staff, and then eventually to the local school council was also really important.
What I think is really amazing about local school councils is that you don't get to just work with teachers. Like you mentioned, you get to highlight things that students saying that are important. You also get to work a lot more with parents and, of course, the administrator. So on local school councils, there are the principal, 6 parents, 2 teacher reps, 1 non-teacher staff member, 2 community members, and at the high school level, a student. What was it like working with parents and community members and students?
That's actually what's really cool about the local school council is working with these various groups. We kind of lose focus of our other stakeholders, especially the community people. We tend to really kind of focus in on our students, right? But we also need to consider our partnerships with our parents and also with our community members and sort of have them as contributing members to our entire community.
They have a lot of hands and a lot of parts of how they run the school, right? So like the idea that we should be asking other stakeholders about how to run the school. For local school councils, part of their role is things about the budget and things about the CCWT, which is the Continuous Improvement Work Plan, like hosting those kinds of meetings and making sure that the public hears about these kind of important kind of things. So recently we had a meeting about our budget and we passed our budget school year. What has it been like as a teacher learning more about the budget process and how the local school council plays a role in that?
One of the most complicated things that a teacher can try to wrap their head around, and when it comes especially to Chicago Public Schools and maybe other schools elsewhere, but is the budget. It is very complex. There's a lot involved in how a school receives funding. The different levels of government that, provide funds for the school. I think what's important and what I think is as a local school council representative, especially the teacher side, is to understand the budget as how it works for our students. And also I pay attention to like how our budget looks in terms of our staff and retaining staff as well. I think that's important. I would encourage anyone who's interested to learn more about school funding to really take a close look at it. Anytime we go through like a budget presentation from our admin, you don't get a lot of like questions. When you just look at some of those reports and it's all spreadsheets and numbers and lines and accounts and all these things, people just kind of like, it just washes over. You can see on people's faces is like, well, okay, I wouldn't let that discourage anyone from wanting to run for the local school council because it is important. To understand a little bit about how budgeting works.
Intentionally complicated, right? Because you get less questions that way. And I would argue that part of being on the LSC is to ask as many questions as possible, especially how the budget relates to the continuous improvement work plan, right? Like we're going to try to move the school forward, then we need to budget in areas that we want to grow in. And I thought it was really important what you said about like, as far as staff members, always looking at like, is our school staffed properly, right? Schools are understaffed in general. So to try to pass a budget where you're going to cut staff members is, I think, completely inappropriate for Chicago Public Schools.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. I think the formula obviously needs to change.
And you were also on our local school council, not only to evaluate our contract principal, but you were also part of the process to select a new principal that happened last year. So let's kind of unpack some of that a little bit, or the concept of picking a boss. Not a lot of workers get a chance to do in their work environment, and we are able to do that as a local school council member. So how did that kind of feel or go?
I thought it was a really cool process to be part of, but it's also very anxiety-inducing. It was very stressful and very busy. I mean, if the local school council had to go through a principal selection process again, you'd expect to, be ready to be called into special meetings and conduct these long meetings with these interviews. There's steps that are outlined in order to like move along the process and to pick someone. I didn't think that so much responsibility fell on the council. I thought there would be more sort of network input, and we did have our network chief sort of like be part of the process. What was, obviously complicated with us is that we had we had shutdown during our process, and so we had to do the rest of it all via remote or Zoom or whatever, and so that complicated things a bit, but it still, went smoothly as far as I can tell. I'm glad that the local school council does have that responsibility because, again, it shouldn't be up to one person to have this to choose. I like that parents and community members and others have teachers and even the students have a say. My favorite part about the process is the public forum, and I think that part is important. The most important part of the entire process, where people can, anyone who is interested can meet the candidates and ask questions or get an idea of who they are.
I think it's a good step towards transparency. When so many things in Chicago public schools are not very transparent, the principal selection process tends to be one of those areas that's a little bit more transparent because there's so many built-in steps. Once you select a principal and you offer them a 4-year contract, it's also the local school council's responsibility to evaluate that principal yearly, and then in the 4th year they do a cumulative to see if they want to extend a contract for another 4 years. And so I know our local school council just finished the principal evaluation. Again, this unique situation where the worker gets to evaluate the administrator, right? Like, again, that's not
totally. Yeah, I think, yeah, that part was that part was weird. It's weird to give feedback to your boss. People aren't used to that, where you can tell your boss, hey, like you're doing this great, but you need to work on this. It's okay. And I remember even talking to our principal about it afterwards, and I told her, I said, hey, that was really weird, giving your boss feedback. And she said, well, that's how it should be. It's a two-way street, where it's not one person just telling you that you need to do this better, do that better. It's like an exchange, and that's what I like about that.
Just have a different role in the building, right? It's the same. We're all trying to help kids increase their success, right? Well, are there any final thoughts? What would you say to someone who's thinking about running for the local school council? What would you kind of tell them?
Be ready to commit yourself to the council. I mean, it sounds like 1-2 meetings a month. Doesn't sound like a lot, but they do sneak up on you, and you do have to do work in preparation for those meetings. And just know that there's a schedule and that you have to obviously attend those meetings. That's required. I think organization is a really important part of being on the local school council. I would say, like, hey, look, like if you want to like advocate for your staff, if you want to be someone who champions what we do as a staff and also how we work with our students, and you also want to like champion student causes and have an additional voice for our students, since that's ultimately who we work for, then absolutely 100% do it. You can bring up resolutions. You can bring up things that you want to see happen at the school, and bring issues to the local school council that we can all discuss and consider and take action on if needed. So if you're someone who wants to like advocate, if you're someone who wants to speak up on behalf of students and teachers at the school, and if you're someone who wants to work for improving the school as a whole, then by all means, it's something that you should definitely consider. I am grateful for my time on the council. I learned a lot about myself. I've learned a lot about the school, about the district, and how things work.
Well, thank you so very much for stopping by to chit chat with Chichopolis, Mr. Koutavas. And that's it for today. And thank you so much again. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.